Hi guys, Squirrel here and welcome to episode 4 in my tutorial series on Microsoft Flight Simulator. The goal of this particular episode is to take you on your first flight. It's therefore aimed at people who are new to flying or maybe new to Microsoft Flight Simulator or just want to learn some of the basics of aviation. This series is built on previous episodes, and in earlier episodes we looked at how to set up your sim, how to set up your peripherals and set up your cameras. So you must have got to the point before watching this episode that you've at least set up your sim and can control the aircraft and can look around the cockpit. Now if you'd like to see more episodes on Microsoft Flight Simulator or this tutorial series in general, don't forget to subscribe. So without further ado, let's jump into the main menu and get set up. So here we are back in the main menu. There's some options that we need in order to do this particular lesson. So go to Options, Assistance, then in Piloting, set it to Hard. In Aircraft Systems, set that to Hard. In Failure and Damage, set it to Easy. Nav aids, it's up to you. They're just markers that you'll see. They won't interfere with what we're doing. Notifications, set that to Hard. And under User Experience, turn them all off. Now save that, go back to the main screen. Click on the world map. Click on the aircraft, choose propellers, find the Cessna 152 Textron Aviation, that's not the Aerobat, just the normal one. And then for your departure runway, choose Renton, which is K-R-N-T. Renton. Runway 34 is what you want. And then for the flight conditions, turn off multiplayer, turn off air traffic, click on preset, choose clear skies, and then pick somewhere around midday. That should be it, and then you can just hit fly. And here we are at runway 34 at Renton Airfield. Now, I must stress, just before we begin, there are a few things that you must already have mapped. Obviously, the first one is you must be able to move the yoke with your controllers. Second thing is you need to be able to move the throttle. Third thing is you need to be able to move the trim wheel. This is very important, so make sure you've got controls mapped to the trim wheel. Other things that you need to have mapped are the flaps up and down. I showed you how to do this in your peripheral setup video, by the way. And then it would be a good idea if you have some kind of parking brake button mapped, but if not, you can just click on it. But you need to have independent toe brakes and some kind of rudder control. Now if you don't have a rudder control, then I suggest you go to the options and turn auto rudder back on. But it's better if you have some form of rudder control, obviously. Finally, you must have your camera already set up so that you're comfortable for flying. And at the very least, I suggest you have a look right option, which by default should be control right arrow. Either way, if you're moving around, you need to have a button that will take you back to your main view, or control space will do it by default. Now there's a lot to learn when you come to flying a plane, especially if you've never done it before, and there's absolutely no way that I can teach you everything about flying in this video. What I want to do though is to get you to understand some of the basic concepts so that you can at least take the plane off, fly it in a circuit and fly back again. Now to do this, if you press the V key, it will bring up the map, and you can make the map a little bit bigger, and you can drag around and zoom out. This is you're at Renton. And what we want to do is we want to take off down the runway here, and we're going to basically fly a rectangle like that, and then come back and try and land. That is the goal. If you find it more comfortable to leave the map on the screen, then do so. But I'll just turn it off for now. Actually, what you can do is you can just press this button here and just collapse it out of the way, and then just bring it in as and when you need it. It'll help with your situational awareness. Now, I'm also going to be going through some of the basic instruments, and I will be pausing the plane live at key moments when I need to explain some concepts. So first of all, let's look at some of the instruments in front of us and discuss the important ones. So up here on the top left here, this is the airspeed indicator. This tells us how quickly air is flowing over our wings, which is important for generating lift in a plane. If you've not seen my video about airspeed versus ground speed, it might be a good watch later, but for now, just understand that this is telling you how quick air is flowing over your wings and therefore whether you're likely to carry on flying or drop out of the sky. The key thing that we need to look for is the white arc here. The white arc is the speed that we can go in order to use our flaps, and that will become important for landing. Today, we're going to try and aim to fly somewhere between 80 and 90 knots. That will be comfortable. When we come into land, we're going to land at about 60 knots. When we climb out, we'll climb out at about 75, 80. This here is the attitude indicator. Now, the attitude indicator basically has a orange line here that shows you your wings, and then behind it is the sky and the ground. And what it does is it shows you what your position is of your wings relative to the ground. So whether you turn or pitch, you'll be able to see it on the attitude indicator. This is an incredibly important piece of equipment. Just below it is the compass. As you would expect, it looks like a compass. There's north, there's south, east, and west. These markers here are all in degrees, so 30 is 300 degrees, 15 is 150 degrees, and so on. Currently, we are pointing approximately in the direction of 340 degrees. I say approximately, the needle's just left. But 340 is good. And since we're on runway 34, that is actually about correct. So what we want to do when we take off is we want to be trying to keep that heading so that we fly straight down the runway and keep going till we can do our complete rectangle. Also notice that behind us is a marker here, and this is the opposite of whatever is shown here. So when we turn our right turn on our heading, we'll be turning to about this marker here, which is about 70 degrees. When we fly our return leg, we're going to be on about 160 degrees, and then when we make our last turn, we're going to be on about 25 degrees before we turn back on 34 degrees. That is how it's going to go, because we're going to fly a rectangle. So these little markers here will be quite useful, but don't worry, we'll go through that later. The other two instruments that are useful are this one here. This is the altimeter. This tells us how high we are, and what you need to do first is press the B key, which will reset the altimeter so that it takes into account the current local pressure, so it gives you an accurate reading. Don't worry about that stuff. What this is telling us right now, what this is telling us right now is that we are approximately just less than 200 feet in the air. Below that is the vertical speed indicator, and this can give you an idea whether you're climbing or descending. So if this needle is above 0 up here, it basically suggests that you're currently climbing, and if it's below, you're currently descending. Don't worry about this stuff on the right. Don't worry about the turn coordinator. Just focus on these instruments here. Right, before we go barreling down the runway, there's a couple of bits and pieces that we need to talk about. First thing is the flaps. Retract the flaps. They're probably on 10 degrees when you spawned in. Just retract them. This aircraft will take off without any flaps, and having to deal with them during takeoff is not something that we can be bothered with. It just makes life easier if it's turned off. The next thing is the elevator trim. Now, I don't know if you know about the elevator trim, but it's very, very important. What this basically does is it acts as, think of it this way, it acts like you pulling or pushing on the stick. So if we was to trim, let me get back into this position here. If we was to trim up, what would happen is it's equivalent to us basically doing this and holding it in that position, in like a back position, which causes the aircraft to climb. If we was to trim down, it's like pushing the stick forward. But what it does is it basically holds it in that position, which means when you're flying, if you're flying and you're nice and straight and level, but you're having to hold the stick in this position, it's really tiring during flight holding the stick in this position. The trim tab can do that for you. You basically trim the aircraft so that you can let go of the stick and you don't have to pitch or dive anymore. Now during takeoff, it's very important that you get it in the right position. As you notice here, there's actually a takeoff position. So just use your trim button, whatever you've got mapped, to make sure that you adjust this trim. And I suggest that you put it approximately just that side of take. That should do it. That should be about right. Now during takeoff, when we start climbing out, what we'll do is we'll trim back like this until we get to the point where the aircraft is climbing at the speed we want, and we can let go of the stick, and we don't need to pull back or push forward anymore because it's trimmed out. We'll go through that shortly, but for now just set it up to slightly above off and just more into take, and that should do it. Right, go back to your main view and make sure that your parking brake is off, otherwise you won't be going anywhere. And what we're going to do is gradually increase the throttle. As we increase the throttle, the aircraft will probably pull to the left, in which case you need to press a bit of right rudder. Just keep the nose pointed down the middle here. Notice we're flying a heading of approximately 3-4. So that's the heading we want to keep. When we take off the runway, we don't have that visual guide anymore. Try to aim for about 3-4. Now, when the airspeed starts to build up, it will reach about 60 knots. When it does, just pull back gently on the stick and the aircraft will take off. As it takes off, you'll probably find the airspeed either goes down or goes up, depending on how much you've pulled that stick. If the airspeed goes down, put the nose down. If the airspeed comes up, pull the nose up. Pretty simple. If you pull up, you'll climb and the airspeed will come down because it can't go forward as quickly. What you're aiming for is about 80 knots. So there's going to be a fair amount to watch out for here. Try to keep these wings level like this as we take off. Try to keep that heading of 3-4, and as it climbs, try to keep about 8-0. What will happen is the altitude will start to go up. When we get to about 1,000 feet, that's when we'll stop. There's a big hand and a little hand on this, just like a clock. So the big hand, when it's done one full revolution, the little hand will have done a single unit. Each of these units is thousands of feet. So when that big hand's gone all the way around there once, that little hand will point to 1 and it'll be 1,000 feet. That's the altitude that we're going to level off at. So let's give it a go. If it goes wrong, don't worry. Just, jump back in, start again. Don't be afraid to try this until you get it right. So increase the throttle. And it goes to the left, so I'm just going to push the throttle in, push a bit of right rudder, and just try and keep the nose pointed down the middle. Don't worry if you're all over the runway initially. It takes a bit of getting used to. Keep it approximately down the middle. See the airspeed's picking up now. We're past 40, we're past 50. As it reaches 60, I'm just going to pull back on the stick, and up it comes. Now remember, if the airspeed starts to rise, pull up. Keep pulling up until we get to about 80 knots. Keeping my wings level, look at the heading, about 34, 340, altitude's coming up. Now I'm going to trim. I'm going to pull back that trim button because I don't like holding this stick back all the time. So I'm bringing the trim wheel back. You can't see it, but I'm bringing the trim wheel back. And I'm just letting go, seeing if the nose goes back down. If it does, I just pull it back and trim a bit more. And eventually, you should, if you with the trim wheel come back now, you should be able to get it so that I let go and it flies approximately 80 knots. Don't worry if it's a bit over or less, it doesn't matter. 3-4 on the heading, wings level, climbing out at about 80 knots. Absolutely perfect. Altitude is coming up. Now if you need to, press the pause brake key and that will pause the aircraft and just take a minute and figure out what's going wrong. But if I just press the map now, what you should have done, if you kept that heading 3-4, you've basically carried on the runway heading to 3-4 and you're climbing to an altitude of about 1,000 feet. So press the pause brake key again just to unpause. And when we get to 1,000, we're going to push the nose down. What's going to happen is the airspeed will quickly start to pick up. That's because the aircraft is no longer climbing, so the engine propeller starts to spin faster. So just keep that heading there, just keep it on 3-4 if you can. Don't worry if you drift off. And then when you get to about 1,000 feet, which is now just approximately, push the nose down. Notice we're not climbing anymore, and the vertical speed indicator below the altitude is now showing approximately 0, but the airspeed is really starting to pick up. So just pull back on the throttle. About 20% on the throttle should do it. You'll hear the engine calm down. And then when you've got that done, just push the nose trim down and try to get it so that the aircraft is trimmed out and you don't have to push down on the stick anymore. It takes a bit of practice. It's actually easier in the real aircraft, but just play around until you get it about right. It doesn't have to be exact. Just try and keep around about 1,000 feet. Now what we're going to do now is turn to our right course, which if you remember was 70 degrees. So we're going to turn right until the needle here is on around about the 7 position. And what you want to do is try and keep level flight. This is shown as the horizon. We're going to try and keep that orange dot in the middle in around about the horizon position. That will stop us gaining or losing altitude. All these things are tricky at first, so don't worry. So just turn right a little bit. And we're just trying to try and keep the wings level, so I'm climbing, so just push down slightly. Keep turning until you get to about 7-0 on the needle. And then after you get to about 6, just roll it out slowly. And 7-0 degrees at about 1,000 feet. So press the pause brake key, give yourself a pat on the back. So we're at 7-0 degrees, which means we've made our right turn now. So when we flew straight off the runway, we've now turned to the right. Don't worry if you're like down here or up. Don't worry about it, just enjoy yourself. We're about 1,000 feet, and we've got a good speed of about 90 knots. Your speed can be anywhere between 80 and 100. It really doesn't matter at the moment. Just try and keep this heading for 7-0 degrees at about 1,000 feet. That's the main thing right now. So if you've got it nicely trimmed out, it should be flying itself. If not, just touch the trim and give it a little adjustment until it settles down. Now we're going to basically turn again. So our next heading is 160 degrees, which is 1 notch after the 15 there. So turn again. Try to keep things level as you can, so you're not climbing or descending. And just bring it round to about 15 and then start leveling out. Always do gentle rolls. Don't be too aggressive. Your turns, just keep it nice and steady. Try to aim for the numbers. There you go. So 1-6. Just drifting slightly there. And 1-6 is the exact opposite of 3-4, which means we should be flying the other way to the runway. That's exactly what we're doing. So just make the minor adjustments. You'll notice the aircraft might drift to the left or drift to the right. We haven't got any wind because we set clear skies, so we should have nothing to deal with in that regard. But if we had some wind, we might be getting blown off course. But you can see on the right there's the airfield that we just took out of, and we're basically flying back the other way now. And that's it. That's basically how it's working, is we're now flying nice and steady. We're doing 1,000 feet. Time to illustrate just 1 or 2 principles. First thing is, if we pull back on the stick, what will happen? A couple of things are going to happen. Firstly, the vertical speed indicator will go up because we're going to start to climb. The altitude's going to go up because we are climbing, and the speed will come down because we've only got the engine going at a certain rate, and when we start climbing, a bit like in real life, we slow down. So if I pull back, up goes the vertical speed, up goes the altitude, down comes the speed. See that? Okay, so just let go of the stick and let it level out again. Try to get it back under control. You might have to just hold it back because we've lost airspeed. There you go. And then the opposite is true. If we push down, vertical goes down, altitude goes down, speed goes up. So when you finish playing with that, make sure you're back on your heading again of 160 and just try to get us settled back down. Try to get about 1,000 feet and have a quick look where you are. But the reason these are important concepts is because when we come in for a landing, we are by definition going to be pointing the nose down. We're going to want to descend, and therefore we will start to pick up speed. And the reason we care about that is because we don't want to fly too quickly, and we'll have to back off on the throttle. So essentially, if we want to descend, we need to decrease the throttle. If you want to climb, you need to increase the throttle. Basic concepts, but it's only like a car. If you want to climb a hill, you put your foot down. If you're going down a hill, you let go of the throttle. Same thing. Right, 1,000 feet, still holding that heading of 160. Quick look where we are. So once you get to this river here, we should be good to turn right. And what heading we're going to go for? Well, just get it back on 160 a second. Get it back on 160, and our little triangle there says 250, so we're going to turn right onto 250. So same thing, just try and keep the aircraft level and altitude at about 1,000 feet, and turn around. And you should get it round to about 250. Like that. Quick look on the map. There you go, perfect. Right, what I want you to do now is pull the throttle back about another 20% and just bring the speed down till about 80 knots. Now when you do this, the nose is going to go down. The aircraft will want to descend because you've reduced power, so just pull the nose back up. Try to keep it at 1,000 feet. So when you've got 1,000 feet and about 80 knots, retrim yourself. If it goes less than 80 knots like it's doing, just bring a bit more throttle back in. Keep the nose in its position. And just hold 1,000 feet, but now we're doing 80 knots. So what we did was reduce the throttle, but then pitch the aircraft back up, so we didn't lose any altitude. What we've actually done is we're going the same direction, same altitude, but now we're doing less speed. Now we want to make a turn. Probably overshot the runway a little bit, but don't worry, we can correct. So make a turn to our final course, which was 340, which was the runway heading. And there's the airfield in sight. So just keep pointing around because I overshot slightly. Now, point the nose down and pull some of the throttle right back. I've turned it off completely. And you may have to retrim the nose, point it back down again. And what we're basically aiming to do, it's a long runway this, so don't worry about flaps and things like that. We're just going to glide it straight in. Just point the nose down without any throttle. And you're going to aim for the middle of the runway. Aim for the middle, and then just when you get to near the runway, just pull back slightly and then just let the plane effectively glide and hover over the tarmac. Just keep it there like that. Just keep it held nice, and if it wants to fall, just don't let it. Just keep it held back. Just let it glide, let it glide, let it glide, let it glide. Keep holding it back. Notice the airspeed coming down, and then eventually it will just calmly fall out of the sky. It's such a big runway, you can come in at all kinds of speeds, as I did then, without any flaps, and it's not a problem. Now you need to press the toe brakes and slow yourself down. Now there's things that we didn't cover in this video. We didn't cover flap usage and that kind of thing, but it doesn't matter. The important thing is you just have a bit of fun with this. If that went completely wrong, if you found yourself... Hang on. Got camera issues. If you found yourself, you know, going too quick, or you cut short the approach, or it wasn't anything like a rectangle, you know, if you basically took off and you started drifting this way and drifting that way, well, don't worry. Just bring yourself back around. You know what we're trying to do here. We're trying to fly a rectangle. Maybe, you know, go further past the river if you want to. Go a bit further out. Give yourself more time. Go down to this lake. Turn around, get yourself set up. You know, trimming an aircraft and getting used to trimming an aircraft takes time. And what you want to do is basically enjoy this. So, my advice to you is don't worry if your circuit then was completely different to my circuit. It doesn't matter. If you manage to get around and land, give yourself a pat on the back. If you didn't, start again. Just do it again. Just go through the whole thing. You will start to understand how to trim an aircraft, and just play with it. Pull the nose back, get a feel for what happens when you climb and the airspeed comes down, dive and get a feel for what happens. You may wonder what the yellow is here. That's basically telling you that you've got too much speed. If your speed starts to go into the yellow, be very careful what you do. Just gently pull back on the stick and get the aircraft into a climb so that you lose that speed. That's all that is there. And the opposite is true. If you get below around about 35, 40 knots, the plane will fall out the sky. It won't fly anymore. But that is essentially the basics of flying a plane. And I do hope that you got some enjoyment out of watching me do that. Like I say, it is a super, super basic example what we've just gone through there. There are many concepts that we've not explained, but it doesn't matter. Just have some fun, and if you can land an aircraft, you're doing really well. Hope you find this kind of brief introduction to flying useful, and if you did, watch out for the next video where we'll try and get you to find your house. That's it from me. Take it easy, guys. Happy flying.